Welcome to study session 10, Communication in Organizations. Introduction. Just as members of a family, church, school, or political party need information to keep abreast of happenings, organizations have need of communication. Effective communication enables employees to work towards achieving the same goal. In other words, for members not to work at cross purpose, there is need to ensure that information sharing is carried out with limited distortions. Because poor communication can be costly, investments should be made into ensuring that barriers to effective communication are brought to acceptable levels. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Identify and describe the various components of the communication process. 2. Explain the types of communication in organizations. 3. Describe some barriers to communication in organizations. Communication in organizations. What is communication? Communication can be described as a process by which information is transferred from a sender through a medium to a receiver. Information sharing among members of a group is vital for smooth functioning of the operations because it serves as the channel for exchange of information between members across different levels of functioning and authority. Wilson and others, 1986, defined communication as the process of sharing information and creating relationships in environments intended for manageable, goal-oriented behavior. With the context of organizations, organizational communication is a specific process by which information moves and is exchanged within an organization. In formal settings like work organizations, information sharing usually follows official media such as memos and bulletins, even though non-written forms such as body language and eye contact are also used in information dissemination. The sales manager may request that the sales team increase sales volume by 20%. To persuade suggests that the reader may be motivated to act. When the purpose of communication is to build goodwill, it suggests the creation of positive image of the organization that will attract applicants to the organization or people to do business with the firm. For instance, while responding to a question, your answer will not just be limited to informing your reader, but will seek to build goodwill also by suggesting you are competent and perceptive and that your answer is correct and complete. Components of the communication process. Message sharing in organizations is a process that incorporates several elements, namely the sender, the message, the channel, the receiver, noise, and feedback. Sender. The sender is the person from whom the message originates. He or she is the one that encodes the message. Encoding refers to the activity or process of transforming an idea into a message expressed either in written, for example memo, verbal, or non-verbal, for example facial gestures or eye contact forms. The sender is sometimes known as the communicator. Message. The message is the communication which might be an information, request, or command. Also, the message might be verbal or non-verbal. Channel. The channel is the avenue through which the message is transmitted from the sender to the receiver. There are varieties of channels for transmitting information in an organization, and these include email, face-to-face meetings, voice conference, written memos and bulletin, voice call, SMS, and so on. In recent time, the social media, for example tweets, Facebook, has been gaining ground as a means of sharing information in the workplace. Receiver. The receiver is the person to whom the message is directed. He receives the message, processes it, and responds to its contents accordingly. This means that the receiver is the one who decodes the message and makes sense out of its content. Feedback. The feedback is a response from the receiver to the sender. This can only happen after the receiver had successfully decoded the message and interpreted its content. Feedback is an indication that the receiver had acted on the message. Noise. As message is being transmitted between the sender and the receiver, it encounters disturbances that interferes or distorts the smooth flow of communication between both parties. Theories of organizational communication. In other words, noise can be described as background contamination surrounding communication that interferes with the clear reception of the message sent. Factors that can lead to noise in the communication process include illegible writing, high noise levels in a busy office, or large volume of email leading to important email being overlooked. Communication accommodation theory. Communication accommodation theory is concerned with the underlying motivations and consequences that result when there is a shift in the conversation styles of communicators. The theory contends that communicators use techniques of divergence or convergence to modify or adjust their style of speaking to others. People from ethnocentric backgrounds use divergence to emphasize their group identity, while people from weaker ethnic groups use convergence to win social approval. There is a need for management to understand how an individual's ethnic background can influence their conversation in the workplace. People who are ethnocentric will be more likely to be arrogant while conversing a position or during conversation. Social penetration theory. This theory is a theoretical framework that sheds light on interpersonal communication. It proposed that the ultimate goal of information gathering is to promote effectiveness. Take two. The ultimate goal of information gathering is to promote effective interaction among people. This means that people seek information about others so that they may broaden their knowledge about their characteristics in order to relate better with them. When we have relevant information about an individual, predicting how they will feel, act, or think, or even behave becomes easier. 1. Helps to build a context of understanding. Words change meaning depending on the context. Interpersonal communication reduces ambiguity regarding the meaning of words in a given context. It thus helps to promote better understanding. It helps to establish identity, status, and roles of those involved in a conversation. It helps individuals express and receive interpersonal needs. These needs are inclusion, control, and affection. Cognitive dissonance theory. According to this theory, cognitive dissonance, belief or action, is psychologically painful and people are motivated to avoid it. Because of the need to avoid feelings of dissonance, individuals have a high tendency to avoid conversations that are not consistent with their own views, change their beliefs to match their actions, and seek reassurance after they might have made a difficult decision. According to this theory, people will tend to avoid communication that challenges their personal views or beliefs, and this might have negative effect on organizational development. Types of communication in organizations. Communication within an organization can take four basic forms: upward, downward, lateral, and hierarchical communication. These forms of communication are discussed shortly. Upward communication. This is the type of communication in which there is a direct exchange of information between employees and management. In other words, under this system, information flows from bottom to the top. Therefore, there is a need for the message to pass through intermediary level employees such as supervisors or managers before it gets to the management. This type of communication enhances organizational development and boosts employee contribution because it enables management to hear directly from lower level employees issues, matters relating to their needs, problems, suggestions about how to improve performance, and other challenges they encounter on the job. Examples of upward communication include staff management forum. 2. Downward communication. When message passes from the top to the bottom, it is known as downward communication. In downward communication, message typically emanates from the top, that is management, and is transmitted down the organizational ladder to lower level employees. The message is channeled through layers of intermediaries before reaching the final recipient. This type of communication may serve several purposes from the point of view of the employees, such as to remind them about policies, strategies, new developments, and challenges of the organization. 3. Hierarchical communication. This is the exchange of information in a back and forth manner between at least two organizational members of different statuses. Typically, a high status employee such as manager sends a message down to a lower status employee such as an office assistant, who in turn acts on the message and provides feedback to the manager. Thus, the process involves downward manager, upward office assistant, and downward manager communication between the parties. Due to its peculiarity, hierarchical communication represents a form of information sharing that seeks to promote effective communication in organizations by incorporating and harnessing the benefits of upward communication and downward communication in the message sharing process. Lateral communication. This is the type of communication that cuts across different functional units such as work teams, departments, units, and committees that make up the organization. Such synergy in information sharing between different units is necessary for effective organizational functionality. Interpersonal communication. Basically, interpersonal communication is the type that involves only two people in a dyadic interaction which utilizes all components involved in the process of communication. Interpersonal communication involves a number of components associated with non-verbal communication, and they include the following. Body language. When an individual can stop speaking while their body continues to send signals through touch, gesture, posture, facial expression, and eye contact. Posture and body movements connote attributes such as energy and openness. In North America, body positions are laden with meaning. It is believed that open positions suggest that people are accepting of and open to new ideas. Closed positions suggest that people are physically or psychologically uncomfortable, that they are defending themselves and shutting other people out. Paralanguage. This aspect of communication conveys a number of clues and is distinguishable into four separate areas. These are voice quality, such as pitch, resonance, and range; vocal characteristics, such as whispering, groaning, and coughing; vocal qualifiers, that is, intermittent changes in volume or pitch; and vocal segregates, pauses and interruptions. Prosemics. This makes reference to the spatial needs of people and their environment. It helps in explaining the role of communication distance and type of message. For instance, the distance is physically close when sharing a gossip than when a football game is being discussed. Environment. This refers to the effect of the layout of a room or an office accommodation on the communication process. Environment can reaffirm the status and authority of the occupier of the space. For example, a boss is likely to summon a subordinate to his office to discuss a pay raise or bonus. Because the venue of the meeting is the boss's territory, it gives support to the boss's view. In addition, people with higher status occupy bigger spaces in the organization. Temporal. This deals with the use of time, and the use of time to create an impression is well understood in effective communication. A meeting that disrupts normal work activity will give the message a greater impact than one that is held on a public holiday. Eye contact. In the communication literature, eye contact is regarded as a non-verbal cue that serves four important functions in information sharing. First, eye contact regulates the flow of communication by signaling the beginning and close of conversation. In most cases, people tend to avoid looking directly into the eyes of their listeners in a face-to-face conversation until they have concluded. Second, gazing tends to send the message that the receiver and sender have interest in the conversation. Depending on the culture, gazing at the other person can connote lack of interest, discomfort, or embarrassment in European or American cultures. It is a sign of respect in Asian countries. Unless it is well adjusted to, differences in eye contact can lead to miscommunication in the multicultural workplace. Barriers to communication. Scholars have argued that every element in the communication process is a potential barrier. When barriers occur, they disrupt the flow of communication between the sender and receiver. Basically, there are four basic barriers to effective communication. Process barriers. All the elements of communication can affect the effectiveness of communication. Feedback barrier can happen when an employee assumes that the manager's smile means approval for a request. When the information from the manager is incorrectly interpreted by the foreman, it leads to sender barrier. Personal barriers. Personal barriers in communication can happen as a result of poor communication skills, psychological needs, health, level of trust between members. Physical barrier. This comes in the form of physical distraction during conversations such as the tones of a ringing phone, physical distance between the parties, distortions caused by interruptions on the phone. Semantics. Semantic barriers often show up during the process of encoding and decoding the message. This means that semantic barrier originates with the sender and receiver of the message. Study session summary. In this study session, we are able to identify and describe the various components of the communication process. We also explained the types of communication in organizations and described some barriers to communication in organizations. This is the end of PSY 562. Thank you.